Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the fascinating story of how a single island nation ended up with a legal system built by three different empires. It's a tale of conquest, clever strategy, and a colonial blueprint that would reshape Sri Lanka for good.
So let's get right to the heart of it. Here's the puzzle. Sri Lanka's legal system isn't just one thing. It's this incredible mosaic of Roman Dutch law, ancient traditional laws, and of course, English law. So how on earth did that happen? Well, today we're going to zero in on one really big piece of that puzzle, how English law became such a dominant force on the island.
To get the answer, we have to start with the British colonial playbook. You see, when they arrived, they didn't just show up and tear up all the old rules. Oh no, they had a much more strategic approach for getting their own laws in place.
And at the core of that playbook is this landmark 18th century court case called Campbell v. Hall. The principle it laid down was, well, surprisingly practical. It basically said, when you take over a new territory, don't just throw out all the local laws. Instead, you keep them running and you just layer your own laws right on top.
So what's really important to get here is that this was a strategy of gradual layering, not some kind of instant total replacement. The local laws would keep going, but, and this is the kicker, the British Crown always held the trump card. It kept the power to introduce new laws or change things whenever it saw fit. And this wasn't just an idea, it was confirmed in official proclamations, setting the stage for a slow and steady infusion of English law.
All right, so that's the theory. But how did this layering actually work in practice? Let's take a look at the first method, the direct import of English law. You can think of this as the main highway for British legislation to drive straight into the colony. The most straightforward way was just automatic application. Because Ceylon, as it was then known, was a British colony, certain laws passed back in the UK just applied there by default. They didn't even need to pass a local law. It was a direct export from the very heart of the empire.
And we're not talking about minor stuff here. These acts covered some pretty fundamental things, from extradition treaties to medical standards. I mean, take the Copyright Act of 1911. Just imagine, overnight, a book published in Colombo was suddenly protected by the exact same law as a book published in London. That connected the island directly into a global, imperial legal network.
Now, the second method was honestly even more clever. Instead of just imposing laws from the outside, the British actually built a kind of legal backdoor into the local Sri Lankan laws themselves. This created a permanent opening for English law to just flow right in whenever it was needed.
This slick little tool is called a reception clause. It's basically a line of code, a legal instruction written right into a local law that says, hey, if our own rules are silent on this particular issue, you have to use the English rule instead. It's an incredibly powerful way to make sure English common law would fill in any and all of the gaps.
And here it is. This is a perfect example of that plug-in in action, right from Sri Lanka's evidence ordinance. It says, flat out, that if there's any question about evidence that isn't covered locally, the courts must turn to English law. Just think about that. With one single sentence, the entire massive body of English evidence law was imported directly into Sri Lankan courtrooms.
So on top of these direct imports, there was a third method, and this one might have been the most widespread of them all. It was simple. Just model new local laws directly on existing English ones. It wasn't about filling gaps anymore. It was about adopting a whole proven template.
And you can just see how systematic this was. Entire fields of law, especially commercial law, things like the Sale of Goods Act or the Companies Act, they were essentially copied and pasted from English statutes into local ordinances. For the British, this was just incredibly efficient. It standardized all the rules for business and trade across the empire, and it made sure they had a predictable legal environment for all their commercial interests.
But, this layering of law wasn't just some abstract thing happening in commercial courts. Not at all. It had a very real, very direct impact on the diverse communities across Sri Lanka and on their traditional personal legal systems that have been around for centuries. And this really shows that English law didn't just exist alongside these personal legal traditions, it actively changed them. For the Kandiyans, for instance, the English Penal Code completely replaced their traditional criminal law. For the Tamil community, English-style laws were used to fill in gaps in their customary code. And even for Muslim law, a system based on religious texts, English statutes still impose new standards, like a universal age of consent for marriage.
So, after all of this, after this intricate, century-long process of legal transformation, what are we left with? What is the ultimate legacy of this colonial blueprint?
But when you step back, you can see the British used this multi-pronged attack to weave English law deep into the fabric of Sri Lanka. They directly imposed it, they cleverly integrated it with those legal backdoors, they copied entire successful models, and they strategically modified traditional customs.
And that's the thing to remember. This wasn't some hostile takeover that happened in a single day. It was a gradual, deliberate layering that unfolded over more than a century, and the result is the unique, hybrid legal system that exists today, a living, breathing record of the island's incredibly complex colonial past.
And this brings us to the big final question. What does it actually mean for a modern nation to try and navigate its future when its rulebook is written in the legal languages of ancient kingdoms, Dutch traders, and a global British Empire all at the same time? It's a profound challenge, and it really defines the complex, living legal identity of Sri Lanka today.